Oi, this is the Profanity Gnome, and I'm here to tell you that if you're under 13 years old, fuck off this video! Get the fuck off YouTube! Get your mama to get your dad's cock out of her ears and actually be a parent! This is for adults only! And for everybody else, enjoy the video. Is it just me, or is the creator giving us less and less screen time?
It's just you.
I wonder if this is some kind of way of being punished! The episode begins with that Oscar kid, as well as Ozpin inside of his brain. We learn that Oscar lives on a farm with his aunt. At least his aunt. No other family members were presumed there. And Ozpin keeps convincing him, or trying to convince him, to go to Minstrel. Oscar, of course, says, "No, I'm going insane, and you're not real." But Ozpin assures him he is quite sane, not necessarily normal, and they have a mission to do. They have to fix the world, right the wrongs, and do all of the things that a main series protagonist should do. Take note, RWBY. As well as saying that their souls and minds are one, whether they like it or not. And he proves this by having Oscar remember things he couldn't possibly remember, as well as Ozpin telling him things about his life that Ozpin clearly would never know unless something like that were to happen. Oscar, I feel bad for this kid.
Wait a minute. If all the characters in this show are themed after other characters from legends, myths, and other stories, let's see, this kid lives on a farm with his aunt, and Ozpin, who is Oz, is in his head. Dude, Oscar's fucking Dorothy Gale!
On a side note, does anybody else think that it would make more sense for Ozpin to go inside of RWBY rather than them just make up a new character themed after Dorothy? I mean, I haven't seen much of RWBY lately, and I don't know if there's a reason why he's inside of Oscar, but for me, it just makes more sense for him to go inside RWBY. She is the main character after all, and it would make RWBY less of a wallflower. We later head back to Whis, who is also having her own little adult problems, as her father is proceeding to ring her out for embarrassing the family name. And Whis reminds him that she is the owner of the family name. He just married into it.
Ooh, apply some ice for that burn.
But unfortunately, Whis may be the Ice Queen, but her daddy is the fucking Blizzard. And he pretty much all but grounds her and forces her. She's not allowed to leave the capital, she's not allowed to leave the house, she's not even allowed to leave her room. Whis detests this, but he justifies it by saying, "You acted up, and now you're grounded, until you agree with my statements." Whis says, "But people will ask questions. After all, you can't just say that the heiress of the greatest family fortune ever just suddenly disappears." But then he drops the bombshell. She's not the heiress anymore. Apparently, he's changing the will. And cutting Whis off until she falls in line. She then starts putting two and two together and confronts her brother, the spineless twerp. Apparently, he's been playing this from the beginning. The whole reason he was supporting Whis in her actions was because he wanted the fortune. And, well, Whis breaks down. But Heat on Ice has a funny thing about it. Sometimes it just melts into a puddle, but sometimes it creates even bitter, stronger ice. And Whis uses this melting property of hers in order to become stronger. She breaks out her sword and begins training.
Yeah, let's train. Come on, let's do this. You got it, girl. Yeah!
Too much? But then we cut back to Team Ranger, as Crow has joined the fight with Jared Leto. He then proceeds to go into a fighting match with Jared Leto, and they're both holding their own ground. Fast pace, high speed fighting, real stakes. Yep, this finally feels like RWBY again. The gang tries to help out, but unfortunately, they're unable to subdue him, and Crow tells them all to stay back. RWBY takes this as an opportunity to practice her sniper skills, but no matter what, she just can't get a clean shot. And Crow, well, he practices beating a motherfucker until he submits, but for some reason, no matter what they do, he's just not going down. And I do have to say, it's finally nice to get this show back onto RWBY's most powerful asset. It's action scenes. I would just like to say right here that I don't think it's fair to compare two different franchises. However, I do think it's pretty reasonable to compare RWBY to Red vs. Blue here, seeing as both of them had a similar problem with the death of Monty and the loss of their head animator. But while Red vs. Blue had its storytelling and story-focused characters to fall back on when they were trying to change up their animation style, RWBY doesn't really have that luxury since it was mostly a high-speed animated show. So the fighting continues, as RWBY decides to not follow Obi-Wan's advice and stay on the high ground. She goes to Jared Leto fighting on even ground, which Crow still tells her to stand back, but she says she won't slow him down, but apparently that's not the reason why he wants her to stand back. But her influence causes Crow to get hurt, which it coincidentally gives RWBY the opening she needed to cut his freaking tail off! Well, at least the stinger part, the only part that mattered. Now with one of his key attack features gone, and bleeding out, and a hell of a lot of pain, the others decide maybe it's time to back up the guy kicking his ass. And now it's a 5-on-1 fight, and Jared Leto decides to retreat. And then they confront Crow, trying to address his injury, or interrogate him about what's going on. That works too. And all Crow responds with is, "What's your favorite fairy tale?" Which of course means he's going to tell them about everything going on. That was Punished. A great episode all around. I don't feel punished at all. With Whis' dad pulling out the hard guns in order to try to take over Whis' entire life and put her under his thumb, it's only driving her in order to keep going forward to get out of this horrible situation. I'm glad she's not being a little princess crying all day waiting for her knight to rescue her. She's her own white knight.
Oh, but let's not forget Oscar. Him and Ozpin's relationship is starting to finally bear fruit, as we finally get to see what it actually means to have your soul and mind fuse into another body. And we're getting a little bit more lore on Ozpin, something that we don't really see much of.
I suspect someone might be being set up as the new main character of RWBY.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, Oscar seems more of the hero's journey type than RWBY ever was.
But of course, we can't fault the fight scene. Yeah, it's not as good as Monty but what are you gonna do? They did the best of what they could work with, as we see that what happens when Crow is actually serious when taking down his opponents. This would also mean that RWBY, as well as Team Ranger, is going to be the first one of the RWBY crew to actually know what is all at stake when it comes to this Salem, this white bitch, who still hasn't done anything. Except, sick Jared Leto out on RWBY. But that's about it. Not gonna lie, I was kinda getting bored with this season until this episode showed up. And now I hope that the rest of the season is just as good, if not better, than this episode. I know that might be hoping for a little too much, but this is definitely the quality I expect when I'm watching RWBY. So, with that being said, we're the Cartoon Gentlemen, the organizers of Chaos as Vintage Kings. We'll see you next time.
Possible threat detected.